It's taken a long time for this to happen, but this is an unbelievably good change. So, you guys who've been paying attention to affixes. Affixes have been a main conversation of this entire expansion. Actually, maybe the singular biggest. Like, if you remember last expansion, people are going on and on about covenants, you know, conduit energy. There was just these constant points of emphasis. Really, honestly, they kind of fixed a lot of that bullshit this expansion, which is good. The tuning has been much better this expansion. So I think now as you've gone down the list of important things that were wrong or bad, it has now been focused on like the affix system, which has been largely the same for a long time. They recently removed seasonals, which was, in my opinion, the only good part about Mythic Plus affixes, or potentially good part. And then they obviously changed around some ideas here. Oh yeah, so they reintroduced the level 7 bucket to like a really, really negative response. It was, you know, a pretty universally, this, you said you were making these easier and less impactful, and this is kind of the opposite of that. So they've been like kind of bouncing back and forth with that. They've been fucking with explosive, which was heavily controversial. We're going to go down here and see what they're doing. Obviously, you can see they removed explosive, replaced it. They made a bunch of changes here, but something we've been harping on for weeks is something that they actually addressed in this post. There's multiple mechanics that are like this. If I do like a little shitty graph, right? Here's like the number of mobs in the pull. I guess this would kind of be like the difficulty line. Like current difficulty, or the affixes difficulty, is on the left. The more mobs you pulled, affixes like storming and bolstering and, you know, bursting and almost all of these mobs, and afflicted, incorporeal, old explosive, it got harder. And here's the line right here. This line signifies what you are paying attention to in the dungeon, right? And until the line actually goes above here, most of those affixes, you actually are more focused on the actual pull than you are the affixes. That's been my take really this whole time. Their idea for affixes, which a lot of people think there really shouldn't be, but shouldn't be affixes, or it should be like completely redone. They're not going to do that right now, so let's just go with the thing of they are going to make affixes. If they are going to make affixes, they should never be at any point more impactful than the current pull that you are doing. You are never focusing more on the affix than you are the actual boss pull. I think on multiple of these affixes, which they do address this in this post, is they are making it so when it gets to, or it could be number of mobs in the pull, or it could be Keystone level, as you'll see with Spiteful. Here is fine. On like 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 mobs, it's like whatever. But as soon as you pull bigger than that, these things, it's actually like exponential. Like it's not a straight line, but you get the point. It just becomes more important than the actual pull. And this line is like where if it's below this, you can focus on it. So I think the idea is to have every single affix basically not scale as much with the size of your pull, which they had happen with explosive, and you don't want the key level to make some of the affixes just based on the key level at a higher level. It just becomes more of a part of what you're trying to do. So let's look at what they did. So greetings. As we continue to watch everyone play Mythic Plus in the PTR and taking your feedback, we wanted to share additional changes. Our changes this week aim to further lessen the impact of affixes on Mythic Plus dungeon gameplay and match our more challenging affixes to later Keystone levels as players progress through the system. So it seems like the first thing they did was they just swapped the buckets. So if you guys have saw in the last couple weeks, they actually, instead of making it on Keystones 4 and 7, they actually made it 7 and 14. Not like a huge change for most of you, because I imagine there's not a ton of people who like play well all the time that do a lot of keys under 14, at least that watch my stream. There are obviously a bunch of those people. I know, like my girlfriend, for example, did a ton of like 10s, 11s, 12s this expansion when she just started. But this largely won't affect a lot of people. And I think in general, it's just better for the game that they did this. This was a change last week, though. It kind of does, like, the difference between a 4 and a 7 is, like, you know, nothing. So it just makes more sense that there's a higher key level associated with adding an extra affix. So before, the first affixes you would get are the, like, Spiteful, Raging, Bursting, Bolstering bucket. And now you're getting the, like, new bucket that they've been working on, or they just, like, recently revamped. And then they made a bunch of affix updates to those as well. So number 1, Explosive. Explosive will be retired for Dragonflight Season 2 and replaced by Volcanic. This is great. Explosive used to be not that bad when it was just one-shottable by healers, but it did scale with group size, so it had problems. Their idea to remake it was going to have more health, but spawn less, so it was something you had to swap to. I think in general that would have been not awful if they did two things. I think removing explosive is the right thing to do, but I believe it's due to two things. If they would have made explosives able to be cleaved, that would have been, you could have kept their health value and still made them spawn less and stuff, and it wouldn't have really been as much of an affix. That's kind of the point. All of the affixes that are good are ones that exist but don't really exist. That's kind of the whole thing. So that would have been good, and then because that solves two problems. And if it wasn't going to be cleaved, it would need to at least be remade to not be a totem, so your abilities could hit it. Totems in PvE should never exist. Last boss of Brackenhide, explosives, there's been multiple in the past. If there's ever a totem, you should never be attacking it, or if you should make it some other mob type so all your abilities hit it. Currently, a lot of Melee's toolkits, it's super unintuitive. If the idea for explosives is now we want you to target this thing and kill it, you definitely can't also have some weird stipulation like half of your abilities randomly don't do damage to this thing even if you're targeting it. Right? So, and I feel like if they couldn't solve that, they have to remove it. Like that, in my opinion, that can't exist in the game. It's like horrific design. So really glad to see Explosive gone. Really glad to see Volcanic back, because if I can think over the last like 4 or 5 years, the amount of times that Volcanic is a week, it's a very high chance of being a push week. Which is, you know, if you guys don't do a lot of Mythic Plus, is basically just when the affixes aren't as dog shit, people want to play more on those weeks, so they push higher keys, which is kind of sad to say. That's true. So Volcanic is back, which is great. Super non-impactful. Incorporeal. Incorporeal beings now fade away when combat with non-incorporeal beings has ended. This is actually a great change because they last 20 seconds, which I still think that duration could maybe be looked at, but now they don't take damage, and Perma CC basically just deals with them forever. If you get 2 of these to spawn, they get paralyzed and blinded. GG. It gets banished, whatever. Like, and it's just over, and you can't break that paralyze. So, like, these, I want to say that this has the potential to be kind of limiting in your pulls, but I think they gave this some kind of spawn protection, right? Here's what I want to know. So they did remove explosive, which because of the fact that you could not hit it with all your abilities, in my opinion, had to happen. But they did something with explosives last week that was actually like really, really important, and I hope they apply that to every affix that this can possibly apply to. But basically, it was like no more than 2 can exist at a time, and there's like a 2-second ICD for them to spawn one after another, regardless of pull size. Bro, that should be implemented to every single mechanic. Incorporeal, Afflicted, Storming. I was going to say Bolstering, but Bolstering kind of got addressed today. I just really think it's important that in all of these affixes that scale with group size, they all need to, as the group size is going higher, they need to spawn less and less and less. It does not need to scale linearly. That's a huge problem. That is the only time when those affixes become really, really bad. I think Incorporeal will be fine as it is right now. I'm not going to like doom about. I still think it maybe should be a little bit easier, or it should, I'm just going to go ahead and bank my. I've only done 2 incorporeal keys ever, and both of them were before the nerf. I didn't do any last weekend. It's possible that this affix is super non-impactful and like totally fine, so I'll just kind of hold my opinion on it. It seems like it'll probably be okay. And in general, I think it's fine that everyone in your group, not just healers, has to like just throw out a quick CC when they spawn. As long as there are not too many of them, I don't think it's super impactful, and it's kind of easy. Entangling. Oh, okay, this is interesting. Oh, this is great. Okay, so Entangling was a super fucking easy affix. It like broke really easily, and most classes actually, I think it was like 10 of the 13 classes all have one global they can press as soon as this goes on them that removes it entirely, basically making it one of the easiest affixes. It was a little weird with tanks because of mob grouping, very similar to why Storming is really bad for tanks. So glad they changed this. They made it so now, and also like you needed a weak aura to deal with this. Like if you guys watch me do PTR keys, I basically just put like a fucking massive weak aura over my character that was a giant. It actually killed me a few times because it was so big. It was just a thorn like almost the entire size of my screen. Now it has a distinct sound cue when it's applied to players, and now has a visual indicating maximum range of the vine. That is fucking awesome. One thing that Blizzard has been doing better in this expansion, especially in Vault of whatever, the Dragon Vault raid that just happened, whatever that thing's called. The visuals of mechanics not really needing or requiring weak auras is like really, really nice. I think maybe Thundering and like Storm Surge could have been a little easier without Say Bubbles, but in general, this will make it so you don't really need a weak aura for this at all, where before you like didn't really notice you had it. Afflicted Soul's health no longer scales after Keystone level 20. So this is banger, and I'm going to mention this kind of down here as well. It looks like they did this. They need to do this to multiple affixes. In fact, I think even maybe some dungeon mechanics should no longer scale after 20. Like, there's some dungeon mechanics where the point of them isn't really to kill you, but just because of the way they scale, they eventually kill you, and that shouldn't be the point of difficulty. So obviously this is good for Afflicted, but like think about Halls of Valor, right? Or think about any key that has a singular mechanic that it's like, we maybe could have the damage to time this key, and I think we could live every pull, but this one mechanic, you literally just run out of personals and you die because it's just so one-shotty. Like, tyrannical one-shots, just tyrannical boss one-shots is probably like, that should never really be the limiting factor. I think like early on in a season, they should look to find specific mechanics like that and make them not scale after a certain key level, because usually on a 20 they're like decently difficult no matter what. So even if you're doing a 26, it's not like it's nothing, but it doesn't become this weird limiting one-shot thing, because it's not like it removes any difficulty, because the difficulty is still timing the key. There's always another key level after that. Like, I just think in general, yes, it should be hard to survive. This should not be applied to everything, but like, I don't know, like Odin runes, right? Like, Odin runes, the point of Odin runes isn't this massive damage it's supposed to kill you. It's supposed to be you finding the right rune according to your color and getting a damage buff. Like, it's not intended to be a mechanic that just fucking kills you in 2 globals, right? Yeah, Fenrir AoE, exactly. Just something to think about. Just small thought. And then here's one that many, especially melee players, are going to really, really like. So Spiteful Shades melee damage reduced by 10%. This is not super relevant. Spiteful Shades health and damage no longer scale after Keystone level 20. It's taken a long time for this to happen, but this is an unbelievably good change. Because the thing is Spiteful as an affix can be dangerous and should be dangerous. In fact, Spitefuls are so close to being a non-affix, right? Because like a lot of them spawn when the pull's over and you just run away from them, right? But the ones that spawn during the pull, especially on pulls with uneven mob health numbers, are like really, really dangerous. And I think the worst part about Spiteful of all time is like, yes, it should be very dangerous. You should have to keep your eye on them, but it should never be so punishing that if you let them melee you once, you die, which is the case above a certain key level. It's somewhere in the 20s to where you can never, ever get meleeed by them. Like, obviously the point is you shouldn't get meleeed, but the punishment is just way, way too big for an affix. I believe you will no longer ever get one shot by these. I'm not positive. We can check on the PTR when it's up, but I'm pretty sure a 20 Spiteful melee, maybe a little bit more than half your health, maybe 70% at the absolute most, with a 10% nerf, probably even less than that, probably around maybe 50%. That is like fucking huge chillin'. That is super, super good. Even 60 or 70%, as long as it's not 90 to 100, it's perfectly fine. Great change. Because and this is the way they need to nerf it too, because you can't really nerf Spiteful based on the amount of mobs that are there, right? Because like you just pull more and there are more of them, it is going to scale linearly in difficulty in a way. So you have to nerf the potency of the punishment. Raging. Now this is really interesting. I actually don't really know how this is gonna go, but Raging now grants immunity to CC effects for 20 seconds upon reaching 30% health remaining. Was 50% increased damage done until defeated, and you used to soothe it. I assume that soothing will still now be the case. The question, does immunity to crowd control include interrupts? Because that would be bad, I think, because then you would just like run into groups where if you don't have a soothe, like Holy Radiance goes off and then you just wipe. I really, kick literally isn't a crowd control, so I imagine that this doesn't affect it. I think this is fine. It's actually still... So Raging has always, historically, been, like, the most difficult to deal with. Oh, wait, never mind. THD said Inspiring is the same tooltip, so yes, it doesn't include interrupts. Meaning that kicks will not work. Okay, if kicks will not work on Raging, I think that's a big problem, because it makes your group super, super important to have a soothe, assuming this can still be soothed as well. Also, for tanks, it's going to have roughly the same effect, right? But it just doesn't have the same effect on most of the group. Like when you're dealing with mobs at the end of a really high fortified pack, what you're doing is you're like going through all your CDs, and then at the very end you're basically looking for stops. But now, instead of them having 50% increased health, they'll now just unable to be stopped. It's a little bit less punishing than in Raging in certain ways, because like in Raging just had super weird interactions with certain spells that would like either kill your group, you know, like Fortified Raging without an Enraged spell, or maybe only one Enraged spell and not two, which is pretty common. Like the pull after Bone Maw, the like 2 little blueberries, like that, like shit like that, right? This would just make a lot of pulls a lot better. Skitterflies, yeah, skitterflies fucking... It's super... I would say in general, the punishment for this is in general much, much less than the punishment for something else. And also, when you're looking at a pack, most packs you pull, even in high keys, there's really only one mob that, like, absolutely cannot get a cast off at a certain point outside of, like, Tanks Kiting. I'm talking, like, Holy Radiance, you know, big heals mainly. Maybe Shadow Bolt volleys, like, big raid hits. That, you now have a Soothe for that one mob. Like, you're probably still going to want to run a Soothe on Raging Week. Just the... I'm just going to go ahead and... This is... I'm kind of thinking out loud, but I think this is going to need to be tested a bit. Okay, Bolstering. Man, they're fucking hitting. And just to tie up Raging, I think we just need to play... I think it needs to be played with to feel if it's worse or better. It feels like it has a high chance of being better, especially if you can still kick. But it's only CCs. It'll still be dangerous to tanks, too, because, you know, if there's, like, big frontals you need to stop, like, think about Azure Vault, that entire key, right? Like, Raging Azure Vault without an AoE dispel is going to be, like, absolutely fucking crazy under 20%. Like, but so was Raging for the same reasons, except now you can't actually stop them. So this is the least good change they made, but maybe is still good. All right, Bolstering. Bolstering no longer increases the health of afflicted enemies. Was health and damage. I don't really have much to say to this. This is just a massive W. They should have done this years ago. This was like, Bolstering has like kind of historically been the most singularly most impactful affix. Especially because there's like built-in mobs into dungeons that like think about Algathar, right? Think about like the big worms with all the little guys around it. Think about the big birds with all the little birds around it. It just felt fucking awful to have to sit there and hold your AoE or like have to sit there forever fighting those mobs. This and it also means you can kind of chain pulls now. Previously you couldn't really chain pulls because it would have just wasted your time. This is honestly, I'm really surprised they made this change. This is maybe one of the bigger nerfs they've done to any. This Bolstering is going to be free as fuck now. Like, it'll definitely be really dangerous at the end of pulls, especially for tanks still, but at least you'll be able to finish off the pack instead of kiting it around forever, waiting for it to lose millions of HP. The way better change. Sanguine. Sanguine Ichor Puddles now last for 12 seconds, was 20. So, I don't think this does anything. It doesn't do nothing, but it's like, this is a pretty non-change. And now looking at all the affixes, I'm trying to think of what the bad combos are or what the weaks that you want to avoid. I mean, Sanguine is definitely the worst affix. Bursting can kind of just be hard countered by MD. It relies on Priest being good at the time, but like I'm pretty sure Sanguine is like the one where it'll take the most time off your key usually. So here's what I don't get. For the rest of these affixes, they're making them much less punishing and much better. Why wouldn't they just make Sanguine what it used to be? I'm gonna make this up right now. I don't know this for sure. I'm gonna make this up. I'm pretty sure what Sanguine used to be was the pools used to be smaller, and they used to take longer to arm. So, I don't remember if it was in Legion or BFA, I don't know. But, like, Sanguine Puddles used to be smaller in general, and there was a big delay before they started healing at all, so it just made the affix much easier. Let's fucking bring it back. There was a better version of Sanguine that existed in the past. I'm not saying that this Sanguine is, like, undoable, but the whole point of these affixes is to lower their, in their own words. Our changes this week aim to further lessen the impact of affixes on Mythic Plus Dungeon gameplay. I think for most of these, they've hit the mark with these changes. Bolstering is way better. Raging may be better. Spiteful, infinitely better. Storming still needs... I really want to point this out now. Storming 100 fucking % needs the same spawn protection that Entangling Explosive. We've heard they now have less health and more consistent spawn behavior. Incorporeal has more consistent spawn behavior. Afflicted has more consistent spawn behavior. Yo. I mean, I'll just in all caps. Storming needs spawn protection. Make less of them for sure. Storming is actually, like, I didn't realize this until I tanked last week. Dude, Storming is... I actually think Storming is my least favorite affix on a tank. Like, it's that bad. And it spawning way less would be very, very good. And then Sanguine, again, I just think Sanguine could just have arm time reduced. Or arm time increased, sorry. So, like, Sanguine goes down, and instead of it healing instantly, it heals, like, 1 or 2 seconds later. That really lowers the difficulty. Because the reality is when it's a Sanguine week, it is actually one of the main things you're focusing on. Like, when ads are dying, it's all you're thinking about. You're running around in a circle, you're, like, getting your knockbacks prepared. That is more cognitive load than what you're getting with any of these other affixes right now. Any of them. Maybe look at that. So I think I really love these changes. I'm not really going to play any PTR keys. I'm kind of over that shit. But maybe I'll do a few if I have nothing else to do. Really happy with these changes. If you look at non-affixes last tier, it was basically like Volcanic. In some cases, I would say Quaking was like not awful, but like there were so many instances where it would just like automatically wipe your group, and in general it wasn't great. But now it's like, dude, the amount of affixes that are free weeks went from like 1 affix to like 4 or 5. I feel like even though they didn't hit all of them yet, it's just going to make it so much more often that you feel rewarded for playing Mythic Plus and you're not wasting your time. Or playing an affix that just makes your gameplay less fun. Let's see. If you play caster, you want Quaking to burn in a hole. Yeah, I mean, I'm on record saying that just like for melee specifically, there should never be any totem mobs in the game that just don't take damage from half your toolkit, like explosives. I think that literally ever, a boss, a affix, anything, nothing should ever make you have to stop your spell casts or you get silenced. Like, I think that's actually one of the worst mechanics in WoW. There's no rewarding part of it at all. You don't feel awesome for like barely getting a cast off. It just kind of sucks all the time. So good that they removed that. But even then, I hope bosses remove that. I don't think it should ever be a boss mechanic. It's some outdated shit. What is the combo that exists next patch that you think is like noticeably worse than another week? I'm thinking like, so definitely not Entangling, Volcanic are both turbo nothing. Like any week with Volcanic Entangling is absolutely nothing. Entangling Spiteful, no fucking shot, bro. Spitefuls don't even one-shot you anymore. Entangling is so fucking easy. You literally just press one button and Entangling's gone for almost every class in the game. Storming Sanguine? Yeah, it's just... But the thing is, though, it's not because Storming and Sanguine really have a lot of bad synergies. Like, I guess if the tank is trying to kite things out of Sanguine and they get hit by Storming, they might heal more. The only reason that Sanguine Storming sucks isn't because they have, like, some weird interaction together. It's just because both Sanguine and Storming are the worst affixes in their bucket. So maybe if Blizzard is listening to this at all, the idea would be if the goal of these is to all have similar impact, there are two that are much more annoying than others, and they are Storming and Sanguine. And interestingly enough, those are the only two that have not been nerfed in the way that you've nerfed things this patch, right? This Sanguine nerf is really, honestly, not anything. The difficulty of Sanguine happens in the first couple seconds it is put down, and then largely after that, it never matters again. The change you made to Bolstering was unbelievable. Think of a similar kind of change to Sanguine. Think of a similar... Here it is, dude. Sanguine, give it some arming time. 1 to 2 seconds more than it is right now. It's such an easy affix. Great affix, which is crazy because that's just where we are. But here's how Storming spawns right now. Here's the number of mobs, right? And here is amount of Stormings. Right now, it's this. That is bad. It should be like that. That's how Storming isn't dog shit. That is how you put Storming on the same level as Volcanic. All right. Fuck yeah. Love that. If I'm a Mythic Pluser, I am very happy about today. For one main reason. Blizzard has been saying we want to lower the impact of affixes. It sucks they've removed seasonals. Seasonals are just kind of really good for the game. When they're bad, it sucks, but they've made a lot of good ones that make the game much better. It's the only affixes that have ever made the game better. But this is, since the last couple posts, they have said that they want to make affixes less impactful. Except this is the only post where they've actually done that. They lost a lot of trust with Mythic Plus players. Like, I'm actually in, not that many, but a few Discords with, like, some real, like, terminally Mythic Plus players. And they were so fucking upset, rightfully so in my opinion, of like the last thing. And they lost so much trust because they were like, dude, Blizzard hears our cries. Affixes need major work. And then they post their work on them and it's like the opposite of what they wanted to see. And it's kind of the low key is the opposite of what they said. Like literally the opposite of what Blizzard said they wanted to do. And then this post fixes all of that. I don't know when they had like kind of like this post right here, like a come to Jesus moment. Where they were like, oh, wait, maybe these are... Like, because these changes are all, like, pretty on point. And they all definitely lessen the impact of them. So, why do you think Blizzard was so wrong originally? It's either, like, they really didn't put that much effort into it. And then once people got really mad, they put more... Like, they were like, yo, we're going to give you guys some affix changes. And then it was, like, something... It was, like, someone at Blizzard's, like, third responsibility. So they gave it very little effort. Didn't really understand what changes needed to be made. And then they just made that post. Like, that's being pretty charitable as to how they did that. Because, like, the alternative is, like, it was someone's goal. And the person who wrote the post saying we wanted them to be easier and less impactful, and then released much more impactful affixes and a literal harder version of explosive, that's a really rough look, right? If that was the case. And then people were very loud as to how much they hated that, which is good, because turns out, why do you guys think some classes get tuned more than others? It's because a lot of the times when there's things wrong with a certain class, and there's a lot of people playing it, Blizzard hears that feedback more. Like, I hate to give you guys the impression that crying about things really matters, because obviously looking at that is pretty brutal, but it actually does. Like, the louder communities get more consistent tuning and fixes because Blizzard knows that there's issues. People were really upset with this first post, and it's possible that if that first post wasn't as bad, these changes wouldn't be as good, because Blizzard heard it fucking loud and clear that that last post they made was complete dog shit. The first post they made a couple weeks ago. So